You know exactly what I mean.
There we go, 689. All right, let's take a look at that. So a little bit different than you might expect with this car. That's going to be a bottom hot lap, so bottom of the 1 and 2 and bottom of 3 and 4. Could be a second lap because the first lap you don't have enough grip to run the bottom. So on our out lap, we're going to be running the top to gain momentum. And the way that I run the top is I just get on the brakes pretty darn early. So around this Z max sign is where I start getting on the brakes and just kind of roll the car into the corner. And then I want to make sure that my car starts wanting to come down the track instead of sliding up to the wall under throttle. So I wait for that perfect amount of time and then I start picking up the throttle, and you can tell after I apply throttle, I'm very, very even to this right here. See, I start even going down the track. If you pick up your throttle there and you start going up the track, that means you picked up the throttle too early. So I pick up the throttle and it goes down the track, so I apply more and more and more throttle, and I'm able to get a really good run off of the corner here. And one more tip here is you don't want to keep your wheel turned for too long. As soon as you can afford to start unturning the wheel, that's the best way to go, because that'll give you the best chance of not sliding your rear tires on exit. So I picked up a lot of speed coming into this corner, and in turn 1, I use a lot of brake, so I go to about half brake at maximum. You can see that right here. So I go straight to half brake and then bring it down to a drag and enter the corner. And I had to spike up the brake a little bit here because I wasn't quite dragging enough. I had my brakes set a little weirdly for some reason, so this lap I had pretty bad control of my brakes, but it still worked. And optimally, you want to be you're braking to slow down here, and then you drag your brake for rotation, and you want that to be 2 stages. So you want one stage just a high brake and one stage just a brake drag, and you don't really want to get this extra little brake there, but that was all right for hot lap. That's fine, I guess. So one big key is that right after you get off the brake, you pick up the gas. There's almost no time in between it. So you see my last little brake tap there was what got me straight onto the gas. About half partial throttle is what the car will allow. And you just gradually raise that up the corner until your steering wheel starts turning back to the center. Then you can start applying full throttle. So as long as your steering wheel is kind of at its maximum over in this area, you want to be in partial throttle. And of course, your steering wheel might be in a different area at maximum just because of how steering ratios and all that work. So don't worry about where exactly my wheel is. But I'm saying that at the point where you turn your wheel the most, as long as your wheel is around that point, you don't want to be full throttle. You want to wait. See how I waited until my wheel was in a motion back to the center for me to go full throttle? That's a big key, not only at this track, but just a lot of tracks and in the next gen in general. Sorry, the Gen 4 in general. So big brake. In theory, you want to be dragging. Then you pick up the throttle to half. Then you gradually raise it, and then we can start unturning the wheel full throttle. All right, and that gains a lot of momentum comparatively. Then same idea in 3 and 4. Again, a lot of brake, a little drag, and then we go straight from the drag to the throttle, partial. Then we hold the partial, and then once we can unturn the wheel, we go full throttle. And that's just the ARCA / Gen 4 car short tracks. I don't feel a ton of difference between this car and the ARCA car at this track, just because I don't think you can utilize the high revs quite as much. But definitely a little more power on exit, which is why the bottom works so well in hot lap. And so I just hold the partial until you can start unturning the wheel. Boom, full throttle. And it might be a little later than you expect, but if you start forcing the full throttle about right here, then you're still going to have this much wheel in the car as you're trying to go straight, and then that'll just cause you to spin out. So you really want to wait until your rear tires are more or less pointed in the direction that you want to go, and then you can go full throttle, just because of the nature of how much power there is at full throttle. So you see, I really wait. I like almost overcorrect because I'm feeling the loose condition already with the high partial throttle I was using. So put that all together, and you really just have to wait for full throttle until you can get the car more or less straight. So because we have to wait for that long, there's a real emphasis on the amount of speed that we can carry mid-corner. So I might have even apexed a little too late here. You can see on my other best lap that I picked up the throttle a little bit earlier. It all came back to kind of meet each other at the end, so I don't think it matters too much. But there's probably a tiny bit more speed here in picking up the partial throttle even earlier than I did. But I still got a good run off the corner, so that was all kind of a moot point. But anyways, that's a lap at Bristol, and let's go to the long run. All right, so I did a long run, 31 laps, and this drives, I might not have driven the ARCA car in a while here, but it feels just like ARCA at Bristol. I burned off a little bit more right front than right rear. That's just me overdriving entry a little too much sometimes. If you've done ARCA at Bristol, I honestly can't tell the difference, maybe besides the car being a little more squirrely on exit. So at the beginning of the run, I'm just aiming to get like kind of in the 15s, 14.9, 15.0s, just going the bottom lane here. Just trying not to overcook my tires early run. So you can see a lot of brake. All right, so we did a long run here, a little bit over 30 laps. Man, in these races with the amount of cautions that these have, I don't know if you're going to get much more than 30 laps, but it could definitely go longer. 84, 86, I burned off a little bit too much right front, and that was just from overdriving entries. So this car, if you've driven the ARCA car in Bristol, to me, on long run, this just feels the exact same. Like, you're really taking care of your right front. You don't want to overdrive entries. You don't want to force the throttle too early if you don't have the right approach on entry. So we'll see. So we start off, and like, I'm aiming for kind of high 14.9s, low 15.0s. I kind of let the car wander a bit in the corners because I'm just not trying to force anything. Just using a brake drag on entry. I'm using minimum brake bias here. Just trying to get as much rotation as possible without the wheel, because you can get a lot of wheel into this if you really want to. And honestly, I'm probably still using too much. I like this entry here is a little bit higher. It allows me to get more natural rotation. Diving it too deep into the corner, you need to use a lot more wheel. Like there, I think I dived a little too deep there. And getting a little bit behind in the corner. So you notice I'm just getting a little bit behind every once in a while. Causes me to use more steering wheel. And then, like you hear me say in my videos all the time, more steering wheel equals more tire wear. So just keep in the back of your mind, don't be afraid to use the brake, and especially running the bottom here, because that's how you really minimize the tire wear. Ouch. That wasn't good. Maybe that's why I was a little tight too, but it shouldn't have affected me too much. So as we get later in the run, it starts falling off, maybe 15 laps in or so. And this is where the lap times start falling off. You can see it doesn't want to go to the bottom as well, so now I got to back up my stuff even more. I wasn't really ready for that yet, so now I'm backing it up a lot more. And I'm not quite making the bottom, but I'm trying for that late apex line. I think that the late apex line, you use just as much tire and you're able to kind of get a straighter exit. I think you can start making up time up top later in the run, but I think that would destroy your tires after not a while. Or just a few times running the top, I think it'll start really hurting your right front. So there's like not a 50-50 chance, I think there's a small chance that this race will just go to the top if it's just better to do that. But in my opinion, I think that the top might only be something that you can use a few times before it starts hurting you. So if you want to use it to get a run on somebody, then that's great. But if you're going to use it for 10 laps in a row to try to make up a second on someone, you're probably going to feel that later. So yeah, it's getting towards the end of the run here. Times really start falling off. The car wants to drift up mid-corner a little bit. I kind of just let it. It's better than trying to force it to stay on the bottom. In a perfect world, I'd probably use... See, this was really good because I picked up the throttle and the car didn't slide up the track at all. That's what we're really looking for. 1 and 2, I had a hard time keeping the car on the bottom, so I was just letting it slide up a little before getting back on the gas. I was probably a little slow. I probably needed to find a line that kind of was more naturally on the bottom even when I went to my partial throttle. That was a little better. Still wasn't really on the bottom. 3 and 4 I had a lot more comfort with, kind of keeping the car in a single groove with the brake. But yeah, it starts falling off. So in my opinion, if you get a caution with more than 15, 20 laps on the tires, I think it's time to come in. I don't think that there's going to be much tire life left. It will make that green flag laps. Like if you go just a few caution laps and then a few green flag laps and then mostly caution laps, just count in the back of your mind the green flag laps that you have on the tires. Because I think around 20 is where I would want to start pitting for my first set, then maybe stretch the second set. Actually, you probably want to stretch the last set because track position is probably king. And it's just these races, when there's a lot of cautions at short tracks, it becomes a jumbled mess of strategy, and you just got to be on the right strategy. I would try to go long at the end because that's usually the best bet with cautions reading cautions. So maybe making your pit stop early and then just trying to make it stretch to the end of the race. That might be really good. But it's really hard to say. Each race is different. You have to catch the vibe. Oh, and I think that was where I ended my run. You have to catch the vibe of how much you think people are going to wreck. So if you get a lot of wrecks at the beginning, you might want to go on a strategy that gets you really aggressive and long at the end. Because if you put yourself too far behind on track position at the beginning, then you're just going to end up with a bunch of wrecks in front of you that you have to try to avoid. And then maybe you'll have time to get back to the front. I don't know. I see that make old tires last strategy from the lead work out time and time again. But it definitely takes skill to make that work too. But other than that, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope to see you all on the track.